Okay, let's talk about an interesting topic now. So the amicus brief that was filed in Arkansas, essentially against us. If you could give us a little bit of context around sort of what happened, and then we can talk about who did what, because this gets really interesting, and there's some nuances here that are quite fascinating.
Yeah, so we're going to get a little bit of legal, into the legal weeds a bit. So bear with us. But in Arkansas, which is a great state, it's not the biggest state by market, but it's an important state, had a really, really egregious law that was entered that was very, very detrimental to the hemp industry. And so the hemp industry, led to a large degree by hometown hero, you guys, I really respect and admire that you sort of took this fight on, filed a lawsuit against the state of Arkansas to set aside this law as being unconstitutional, and there were a lot of legal reasons. And we not only won, the hemp industry won like a grand slam home run. The law was set aside.
Yeah, it was a big deal. It was a big deal.
It was a big deal. The judge wrote a very thoughtful legal opinion, addressed some very specific points that not only covered Arkansas, but one of the big wins was it addressed a lot of issues that we're seeing nationally. And just to bring up too.
And I was just going to say, and just so everybody's clear, Arkansas for us is not a top sales state. It's just not. But we had to pursue this there. We had to file the lawsuit because the ramifications of this being put in place in Arkansas and potentially being put in place in other places was very potentially detrimental. So we didn't have a choice. We had to sue.
Had to sue, right? Absolutely. The precedential value to the prohibitionists for this law was way too big to ignore. So the court had several rulings, but just to summarize, I think probably the two most important ones. They said that federal law preempts, overrides state law in certain respects, and the big one being that a state can regulate hemp, just like states are allowed to regulate all sorts of things, but it cannot change the definition of hemp, which is what it did. And also that a state cannot prevent interstate transport of hemp through its borders, regardless of what those regulations are. So those were two. There are other findings. And again, we won in a big way, in a way that's actually precedential for the industry at large. I actually wrote an article about it. It was, did a federal court just, essentially legalize, hemp in all these ways throughout the country through the legal argument. So with that being the sort of the grounds or the place setting for the here, it was a very big win. Well, what happened is the state of Arkansas appealed that to the next higher court. This often happens in litigation. You've got the trial court, and then you've got the appeals court, and so on. And so
a lot of times the states don't even have a choice. Like in Texas, they were automatically forced to appeal it when we won.
Yeah, right.
And so a lot of states just have a natural trigger that happens anytime a case is won against the state.
That's right. And so the state appealed. It was expected. Right. So, but the unexpected thing was there was an organization that filed what's called an amicus brief on behalf of the state. Now, an amicus brief sort of translates to a friend of the court. And so when you have lawsuits where the outcome has a political piece and or it can affect other parties that were not the actual parties to the lawsuit itself, sometimes the court or others will file these briefs in support of one party or side or the other.
And there were multiple filed that were in support of us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very normal, and it just gives the court, as the appeals court in this situation, a broader sort of base to understand what's going on, who's impacted and why, and that sort of thing. Well, a purported hemp industry association actually filed a brief against the hemp industry and in favor of the court.
Yeah, I have to look at my notes at their name because I've never heard of them before. It's ATACH, the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp.
They have hemp in the name. And so this just blew my mind. And in the brief and in actually a letter to Congress, ATACH has said that there's a dangerous precedent being set and that the hemp industry is unregulated and it's selling intoxicating products to minors and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it was very reefer madness, prohibitionist, just garbage.
It was garbage. I think that's the best way. It leaned heavily on reefer madness. And this is an industry association that is supposedly pro-cannabis. And remember, going back, hemp is cannabis, right? But it's also we've talked about the marijuana industry sort of battling the hemp industry, but
Well, this isn't the only hemp industry that's purporting, or marijuana industry group that's purporting themselves to be hemp. There are multiple.
There
are multiple,
just because an industry association has the word hemp in the name does not mean that they're good. In fact, more often than not, they're not good, and they're actually doing damage. So you have to, unfortunately, just like in lots of...
And we will, at some point in this video, we are going to give you who we believe to be the great hemp organizations in the U.S. and what they're currently doing. But we need to be clear, right now, the landscape, there are quite a few marijuana groups purporting themselves to be hemp and then acting in a prohibitionist strategy against hemp. ATACH is one of them. I think I looked up the guy that runs ATACH. He's actually a political strategist.
Yep. Well, very
which
smart.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Very smart, very strategic. And we talked earlier in the segment about how the marijuana industry, and in particular the large multinational MSO marijuana companies, are trying to push hemp out, over-regulating and whatnot. And this is the goal of ATACH, essentially, is, whether stated or not, in its actions, it's attempting to push out the hemp industry and leave the hemp industry with sort of just the crumbs, and to allow the marijuana industry to continue in its dysfunctional structure that's failing to sell the very things that the hemp industry is beating the marijuana industry and selling. And anyway, it's terrible.
I think my own perception about the marijuana and hemp thing is, I think marijuana wants hemp to stay in textiles and like fabrics and like backpacks and fanny packs, right? If you can make clothing out of it, hemp gets it.
Lucas, that's what hemp is, all right? It's an old and antiquated notion that's what hemp is. Hemp is a word. It's a legal word that is defined, and guess what? That
doesn't exist in nature.
It doesn't exist in nature.
Hemp doesn't exist in nature. It's well, not in that sense, but the regulatory term hemp is man-made and created.
And guess what, though? It not only includes all those wonderful things, right? Fiber and grain and things like that the cannabis plant is amazing and does all these things. It includes cannabinoids, derivatives, extracts. Guess what? It uses words like isomers.
Salt, isn't salts in there too?
Salts of isomers,
Yeah.
And so it's for someone to say that hemp is textiles and that's it, and that's the only thing, and maybe CBD. No. The definition of hemp is expansive, and intentionally so.
And this is the one that drives me crazy when people are like, oh, the only reason you guys can do what you do is because it's a loophole. No. That law is very clearly written.
Yeah,
with intention, by the way.
You know what a loophole is? A loophole admits that something is legal, and that it said the person who uses that term doesn't think it should be legal. That's all that is. A loophole is an admission that something is lawful. It's not a loophole.
That's typically how our industry is referred to by marijuana, by the way.
Yeah.
What kind of the loop, they consider us to be like the loophole industry.
We've built a $28 billion industry on a legal loophole. And that's, it's just not true.
Yeah.
It's a very specific definition that was thoughtful. It was fought and negotiated. It's been adopted in different states, and I mean, in all the, it's something that exists.
It wasn't accidental.
It was not accidental. Yeah. And so for people to say that this was the intent was just to create textiles, well then how do you square the word isomers and salts of isomers and cannabinoids? No.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think it's important, to get back to our main point, is to know that there's a group called ATACH, the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp, that is actively working against the interests of the hemp industry, and that it's not the only organization. And it's important, in this era that we're in right now of cannabis broadly expanding and the hemp industry with all its momentum, we're at a place where it's important to do your research and to only support those organizations that actually support your interests.
Correct.
And ATACH is not one of those organizations.
Yeah, there's another one that I feel like I need to bring up. We've gotten, they've been a little bit more amicable towards us, but Hemp Roundtable is another one that is largely marijuana companies purporting themselves to be a hemp organization, and then actively, like ATACH, going into the media, going into different places and saying different things, purporting themselves to be representing hemp and pushing for regulation on hemp. And these industry associations have nothing to do with hemp at all.
The Hemp Roundtable, I've had sort of a back and forth relationship with them over the years, and I have more often than not, sort of pushed back against the Roundtable. In the last day or two, the Hemp Roundtable released some points about hemp that I think are actually moving in the right direction. The problem that and thank you for the Roundtable folks that did that.
For those of you in the roundtable that are in hemp, thank you for what you're doing. We appreciate it. We understand you are up against some pretty immense odds there with some very big marijuana companies. Keep fighting the good fight.
It's true. It's when you have internal fighting and it's difficult. But I think the problem that I've seen with the Roundtable and some other hemp organizations is, okay, so we've got the category we just talked about, the opposition to hemp, sort of like a wolf in sheep's clothing. We're for hemp and presenting to Congress that you're for hemp and then trying to slice with hemp. That's one category. But the other category is, and this is more where the Roundtable is just sort of having to be dragged along, and being, so the Hemp Roundtable, for instance, was pretty opposed to Delta 8 for a long time. And unfortunately, I think that opposition caused a lot of harm to the industry and set the industry back. Now the industry has finally managed, wins in Texas, just like Hometown Hero has kind of pulled that back. And now the Roundtable supports, Delta 8 and talks about that in its regulations. But had it sort of jumped on at the beginning with, hey, here's what the statute says, this is where our industry is, this is where our industry is going, I think that the Roundtable could have been a really good resource. But to be clear, I am not putting the Roundtable in the same category as ATACH. The Roundtable has done some excellent work. It's been present in Congress. It's been present in the states.
And they're improving.
And they're improving dramatically and rapidly. But what I would like to see the Roundtable and other similar organizations do is to understand really where we are as an industry and begin to push quicker rather than having to be pulled along until there's a shift where it's almost too little too late.
Yeah, and this is where it gets weird with these industry associations, is I feel like they are not properly representing their clientele. I mean, these are people that are paying them money. So they're clients. They're members, but they're also clients, right? So it's their job to represent them in the most effective way possible, and yet they're trying to get rid of hemp, which should be a tool that is helping these struggling marijuana companies stay alive and actually become profitable, because a lot of them can't even find a way to be profitable in the industry in the states they're operating in because of the regulations and the taxes and the craziness. And I feel like it's a disservice to their clients and to their members not to be making them aware that this is an opportunity for you to supplement your business.
Yeah, I get the problem is for a lot of these companies, I think early on a lot of the MSOs, not to go back to the MSO conversation, but for this piece, a lot of the MSOs saw an opportunity to join the boards, and they had the money at the time and pay these big fees to join the boards of hemp companies to then internally direct them in a way that they saw fit for their own purposes. And that's, in government we call that regulatory capture, where the industry goes in and gets appointed to be the regulators of that. And it's a similar sort of a dynamic that we've seen in the hemp industry.
Well, you can't blame them. I mean, think about it. What's the best path for marijuana to sort of, try and get their fingers in the government? It's what Jack Herrera tried to do in the 80s with the HIA. He literally set it up as the path forward for marijuana.
Yeah.
Like the HIA was created to be the path forward for marijuana as hemp. Right? Jack knew that if you took fanny packs and backpacks and these innocuous things, they're made out of weed though, you can get them in the government, you can get people to hold them and handle them and be bought in on it in a much easier way than walking in with joints, right? It's a different animal.
It's a normalization process. And I remember as a young lawyer going into federal court with my hemp briefcase, and I felt like I was kind of revolutionary, and some people were like, oh, but it began that, to your point, the ponchos and the shirts and the legal briefcases, began to normalize it. And then we saw CBD. Well, suddenly, everyone's mother and grandmother and whatever is taking CBD. Oh, wait, this is cannabis? Oh, okay. And then, Delta 8 and different forms of THC and smokable flower and all of these things in stages have begun to normalize it. And now, early on, I remember going to and literally having meetings with law enforcement about hemp in the early days of hemp, and the meetings were tense, and law enforcement
We've had those meetings.
Oh, I know you've had them too. And nowadays, it's no big deal. There's always sort of a cutting edge hemp thing that maybe they're about, but
the first meeting's always the scariest.
It's always the scariest. And so, but now law enforcement is like, oh yeah, it's just hemp, whatever. It's not a big deal. But that takes some time. And to your point, this has been going on for a long time, and we're just at a point right now where I think we're almost at a tipping point to where broad cannabis reform is actually right here. It's right here, right now, and we're trying to identify these groups that are going to that are trying to push that aside for whatever reason. They're either prohibitionists in the old school sense that they don't like cannabis, or they're prohibitionists because they want to preserve their turf. And
Correct.
they're coming out in these various
Correct.
ways, and they're filing briefs in lawsuits on behalf of prohibitionists in states. It's insane to me.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ego involved in it too, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things where I feel like a lot of the marijuana companies have sort of gotten in these tough situations in some of these states with the regulatory side of it, and it's sort of like, you know, they don't want to admit that there's a better option that may actually serve their business and their customers better. And so we're really just trying to make people aware of this. Like,
yeah, right. And you know, every industry is regulated, and you know, I think one of the problems that we've seen is that we've had, to your point, you know, a lot of regulators. You know, we've got companies in the marijuana industry, but we've also got the regulators themselves who can't and haven't envisioned a different world. And I think everyone thinks, oh, this is existential. My company's going to go out of business, or the regulators, my job or my role is going to go. No. It's just changing and evolving. You know, the regulators are there, and we need a whole lot less regulation than currently exists in the marijuana industry, and we can talk about that later about what's actually needed. But there is a role, and for marijuana companies, we're not saying, you know, you're out. We're saying you're in. Come, you know, to go back to your original point, come
roll
join
out the
us.
red carpet. We welcome
carpet.
everybody.
Exactly.